The Law by Frédéric Bastiat, Section 2. Another effect of this deplorable perversion of the law is that it gives to human passions and to political struggles, and in general to politics, properly so called, an exaggerated importance. I could prove this assertion in 1,000 ways, but I shall confine myself, by way of an illustration, to bringing it to bear upon a subject which has of late occupied everybody's mind, universal suffrage. Whatever may be thought of it by the adepts of the school of Rousseau, which professes to be very far advanced, but which I consider 20 centuries behind, universal suffrage, taking the word in its strictest sense, is not one of those sacred dogmas with respect to which examination and doubt are crimes. Serious objections may be made to it. In the first place, the word universal conceals a gross sophism. There are in France 36 million inhabitants. To make the right of suffrage universal, 36 million electors should be reckoned. The most extended system reckons only 9 million. 3 persons out of 4 then are excluded, and more than this, they are excluded by the 4th. Upon what principle is this exclusion founded? Upon the principle of incapacity. Universal suffrage, then, means universal suffrage of those who are capable. In point of fact, who are the capable? Are age, sex, and judicial condemnations the only conditions to which incapacity is to be attached? On taking a nearer view of the subject, we may soon perceive the reason why the right of suffrage depends upon the presumption of incapacity, the most extended system differing from the most restricted in the conditions on which this incapacity depends, and which constitutes not a difference in principle, but in degree. This motive is that the elector does not stipulate for himself, but for everybody. If, as the Republicans of the Greek and Roman tone pretend, the right of suffrage has fallen to the lot of everyone at his birth, it would be an injustice to adults to prevent women and children from voting. Why are they prevented? Because they are presumed to be incapable. And why is incapacity a reason for exclusion? Because the elector does not reap alone the responsibility of his vote, because every vote engages and affects the community at large, because the community has a right to demand some assurances as regards the acts upon which its well-being and its existence depend. I know what might be said in answer to this. I know what might be objected. But this is not the place to settle a controversy of this kind. What I wish to observe is this, that this same controversy, in common with the greater part of political questions, that agitates, excites, and unsettles the nations, would lose almost all its importance if the law had always been what it ought to be. In fact, if law were confined to causing all persons, all liberties, and all properties to be respected, if it were merely the organization of individual right and individual defense, if it were the obstacle, the check, the chastisement opposed to all oppression, to all plunder, is it likely that we should dispute much as citizens on the subject of greater or lesser universality of suffrage? Is it likely that it would compromise that greatest of advantages, the public peace? Is it likely that the excluded classes would not quietly wait for their turn? Is it likely that the enfranchised classes would be very jealous of their privilege? And is it not clear that the interest of all being one and the same, some would act without much inconvenience to the others? But if the fatal principle should come to be introduced that under pretense of organization, regulation, protection, or encouragement, the law may take from one party in order to give to another, help itself to the wealth acquired by all the classes, that it may increase that of one class, whether that of the agriculturalists, the manufacturers, the ship owners, or artists and comedians, then certainly in this case there is no class which may not try, and with reason, to place its hand upon the law, that would not demand with fury its right of election and eligibility, and that would overturn society rather than not obtain it. Even beggars and vagabonds will prove to you that they have an incontestable title to it. They will say, "We never buy wine, tobacco, or salt without paying the tax, and a part of this tax is given by law in perquisites and gratuities to men who are richer than we are. Others make use of the law to create an artificial rise in the price of bread, meat, iron, or cloth. Since everybody traffics in law for his own profit, we should like to do the same. We should like to make it produce the right to assistance, which is the poor man's plunder. To effect this, we ought to be electors and legislators, that we may organize on a large scale alms for our own class, as you have organized on a large scale protection for yours. Don't tell us that you will take our cause upon yourselves and throw to us 600,000 francs to keep us quiet, like giving us a bone to pick. We have other claims, and at any rate we wish to stipulate for ourselves as other classes have stipulated for themselves." How is this argument to be answered? Yes, as long as it is admitted that the law may be diverted from its true mission, that it may violate property instead of securing it, everybody will be wanting to manufacture law, either to defend himself against plunder or to organize it for his own profit. The political question will always be prejudicial, predominant, and absorbing. In a word, there will be fighting around the door of the legislative palace. The struggle will be no less furious within it. To be convinced of this, it is hardly necessary to look at what passes in the chambers in France and in England. It is enough to know how the question stands. Is there any need to prove that this odious perversion of law is a perpetual source of hatred and discord, that it even tends to social disorganization? Look at the United States. There is no country in the world where the law is kept more within its proper domain, which is to secure to everyone his liberty and his property. Therefore, there is no country in the world where social order appears to rest upon a more solid basis. Nevertheless, even in the United States, there are two questions, and only two, that from the beginning have endangered political order. And what are these two questions? That of slavery and that of tariffs. That is precisely the only two questions in which, contrary to the general spirit of this republic, law has taken the character of a plunderer. Slavery is a violation, sanctioned by law, of the rights of the person. Protection is a violation perpetrated by the law upon the rights of property. And certainly it is very remarkable that in the midst of so many other debates, this double legal scourge, the sorrowful inheritance of the old world, should be the only one which can, and perhaps will, cause the rupture of the Union. Indeed, a more astounding fact in the heart of society cannot be conceived than this, that law should have become an instrument of injustice. And if this fact occasions consequences so formidable to the United States, where there is but one exception, what must it be with us in Europe, where it is a principle, a system? Mr. Montalembert, adopting the thought of a famous proclamation of Mr. Collier, said, "We must make war against socialism." And by socialism, according to the definition of Mr. Charles Dupin, he meant plunder. But what plunder did he mean? For there are two sorts, extra-legal and legal plunder. As to extra-legal plunder, such as theft or swindling, which is defined, foreseen, and punished by the penal code, I do not think it can be adorned by the name of socialism. It is not this that systematically threatens the foundations of society. Besides, the war against this kind of plunder has not waited for the signal of Mr. Montalembert or Mr. Collier. It has gone on since the beginning of the world. France was carrying it on long before the Revolution of February. long before the appearance of socialism, with all its ceremonies of magistry, police, gendarmerie, prisons, dungeons, and scaffolds. It is the law itself that is conducting this war, and it is to be wished, in my opinion, that the law should always maintain this attitude with respect to plunder. But this is not the case. The law sometimes takes its own part. Sometimes it accomplishes it with its own hands in order to save the parties benefited, the shame, the danger, and the scruple. Sometimes it places all this ceremony of magistracy, police, gendarmerie, and prisons at the service of the plunderer, and treats the plundered party, when he defends himself, as a criminal. In a word, there is a legal plunder, and it is no doubt this that is meant by Mr. Montalembert. End of section 2.